When the world ended on the 23rd of October 2077, it did not end in silence, but in a blinding instant that forever split history into before and after, transforming the face of civilization into something unrecognizable and giving birth to the wasteland that would define the centuries to come, a place where the ghosts of the old world lingered among the ashes of its own ambition. The Great War lasted barely 2 hours, yet its consequences spanned generations, as nuclear fire consumed the heart of cities like Washington, Los Angeles, and Boston, melting concrete into glass and turning rivers into streams of glowing death. Those who survived the initial blasts did so through luck, preparation, or the cold designs of Voltec's hidden experiments, while the rest of humanity faced the grim dawn of a new age marked by hunger, radiation, and chaos. In the first months after the bombs, communication networks failed entirely, power grids collapsed, and military command structures disintegrated as the chain of authority snapped under the weight of annihilation. The United States, once a global power, was reduced to scattered enclaves of survivors, National Guard units clinging to their last orders, scientists sealed within laboratories, and ordinary citizens scavenging in the ruins of their homes. The air itself was poison, filled with radioactive dust storms that turned vast regions into death zones for decades. In these earliest years, the first raider bands emerged from desperation rather than malice, scavengers and ex-soldiers who turned to violence to secure food, water, or fuel. Others formed small communes, trying to rebuild some echo of pre-war life with salvage generators, jury-rigged pumps, and crumbling textbooks that told them how society once worked. Mutations began to appear within a generation. The first ghouls, victims of massive radiation exposure, who somehow retained fragments of their humanity, even as their flesh decayed, wandering the skeletons of old cities and becoming the earliest living records of the apocalypse. The remnants of the United States military, though shattered, still clung to existence in isolated installations. Outposts like Mariposa and the West Tech Research Facility would become the seeds of greater powers in the years to come. In California, the survivors of Vault 13 and scattered pre-war communities began to stir, while far to the east, the ruins of Washington, D.C. lay silent beneath a toxic haze, waiting centuries for explorers to rediscover its monuments. Across the heartland, survivors turned to barter and scavenging economies, using bottle caps, ammunition, or pre-war goods as improvised currencies in a world that had forgotten paper money. Decades passed in silence, broken only by the hiss of Geiger counters and the hum of wind through hollow buildings. Yet, amid this desolation, life persisted. Seeds sprouted in irradiated soil, Brahmin herds were domesticated from mutated cattle, and the first generation born after the bombs began to know the wasteland not as a tragedy, but as the only home they had ever known. In these formative years, the ideological roots of the future were planted. The pragmatism that would later define the new California Republic, the militarism that would shape the Brotherhood of Steel, and the unending will to survive that gave rise to every tribe, settlement, and faction that would inherit the earth. The first functioning communities rose around old water purification systems, hydroelectric dams, and agricultural experiments that somehow still worked, echoing a world that once mastered technology but now feared it. Pre-war bunkers became the birthplaces of legends. In Appalachia, the remnants of responders and free states sought to bring order long before the outside world reconnected. And in the West, The survivors of Vault 15 would eventually emerge to found Shady Sands, the seed from which a republic would grow. In this fragile dawn, radiation storms sculpted the land while humanity redefined itself. Ghouls, mutants, raiders, settlers, all children of the same fire, they scavenged the relics of their predecessors, learning to use laser pistols and microfusion cells without understanding the science that powered them, worshipping the artifacts of the past like relics from a forgotten religion. What little government survived existed only in fragments, bunkers where officers argued over protocols, remnants of the Enclave plotting to restore a nation that no longer existed, and scribes collecting data as though knowledge itself could be salvation. For every survivor who clung to the ideals of America, there were others who abandoned them entirely, creating new laws shaped by necessity rather than principle. The world was no longer divided by nations, but by those who could endure and those who could not. The Wasteland's first generation became its architects, turning ruin into ritual, violence into culture, and memory into myth. Their survival was not just a continuation of the old world, but the foundation of a new one, a world that would evolve, faction by faction, from the ashes of the old United States into a strange and enduring civilization built on the bones of the one that came before. When the bombs fell and the world above disintegrated in fire, the doors of the Vault-Tec shelters sealed shut, preserving fragments of humanity beneath the earth. Yet few beyond the company's highest directors understood that these installations were not built solely for salvation, but as laboratories in a grand social experiment that would shape the future of the Wasteland for centuries. Vault-Tec's public promise had been protection, but its true purpose was observation, measuring how isolation, stress, and manipulation would alter the human psyche, testing weapons and viruses, and studying whether society could be rebuilt after total annihilation. The official number of vaults has always been uncertain. While 122 are confirmed, rumors persist of many more hidden or unfinished, buried beneath cities or mountains, forgotten when the company collapsed. Among the earliest to fall into legend was Vault 12 beneath Bakersfield, designed with a deliberately malfunctioning door that allowed radiation to seep inside, transforming its inhabitants into the first community of ghouls that would later call themselves Necropolis. Vault 15, crowded with people of wildly conflicting ideals, fractured into rival groups after opening, its descendants would become the Khans, Jackals, and Vipers, while a handful founded Shady Sands, the birthplace of the new California Republic. Vault 29 was sealed with no adults, only children raised by an artificial intelligence known as Diana. They would emerge centuries later as the tree-worshipping Daughters of Hecate, proving how easily human culture could mutate when guided by machine logic. In the Mojave, Vault 11 told a darker story. Its inhabitants were forced by experiment to sacrifice one of their own each year, a moral test that ended only when the last survivors refused, discovering too late that defiance had always been the true measure of humanity. Further east, Vault 22 housed brilliant agronomists, attempting to restore vegetation to the world, but their research on aggressive fungal growth escaped control, creating the spore-infected monsters that still roam the Nevada desert. In the Commonwealth, Vault 81 hid a benevolent secret. Scientists there sought to develop a universal cure for disease and, unlike most, balanced compassion with experimentation, producing the prototype serum that would one day save lives above ground. Other vaults were less fortunate. Vault 95 held former chem addicts promised rehabilitation, but secretly supplied them with drugs to observe relapse. While Vault 75, beneath Malden Middle School, trained and harvested children for genetic improvement, its cold efficiency turning education into breeding. Far north in Appalachia, Vault 94 attempted to forge a pacifist society dedicated to reconstruction, yet it fell to supermutants and internal dissent when idealism collided with harsh reality, leaving behind only the echoes of its well-intentioned failure. Vault 96, hidden in the same region, focused on wildlife preservation, releasing genetically modified creatures into a dying ecosystem, proving that even acts of mercy could twist nature further. Every vault became a mirror of human ambition, some nurturing community, others feeding paranoia or cruelty, and together they charted the moral boundaries of the new world. When their doors finally opened, the experiments continued above ground, through the actions of those who emerged. The medical ethics of Vault 81 inspired future healing enclaves, while the savagery of Vault 95's broken survivors fueled new raider chemdens. Across the Wasteland, scattered terminals and holotapes still whisper the details of Vault-Tech's madness. Files left half-corrupted, audio logs of scientists describing subjects as assets, evidence that the company had evolved from a defense contractor into a social engineering engine designed to test the limits of civilization itself. Yet even in its deceit, Vault-Tech unwittingly preserved hope. The descendants of its experiments would found settlements, write constitutions, and build republics, carrying fragments of knowledge that survived nowhere else. In time, the vaults became myth, their numbers carved into rusted doors and scavenged jumpsuits, symbols of both sanctuary and sin. Some remain unopened, sealed for centuries by systems that still hum with pre-war power, perhaps containing people who never knew the war ended, still waiting for a signal that will never come. Others lie breached, their halls filled with skeletons and terminals looping the same final messages, silent witnesses to the price of human curiosity. Together they represent the most haunting legacy of the old world, an empire of underground Edens turned laboratories, whose results walk the wasteland in every settlement and faction born from their survivors, proof that even in apocalypse, humanity's greatest experiment was itself. The followers of the apocalypse emerged from the ruins of the old world as a beacon of knowledge and humanitarian effort, a faction dedicated to healing, education, and the preservation of human culture in a wasteland otherwise dominated by violence, greed, and survivalist nihilism. And their history illustrates the ways in which ideology and morality could survive, evolve, and adapt even amidst the most desperate circumstances. Founded in the aftermath of the Great War by idealists committed to rebuilding society through information rather than conquest, the followers sought to provide medical care, distribute food, and teach literacy to scattered survivor communities, believing that the key to a better future lay not in power, but in the empowerment of individuals. They operated largely in the shadows of larger, more militarized factions, often negotiating peace among warring settlements, and using education as both a tool of diplomacy and a weapon against ignorance and exploitation. In the capital Wasteland, they established clinics and schools in ruins of pre-war hospitals and libraries, documenting histories, holotapes, and research findings from before the bombs fell, creating repositories of knowledge that would survive far longer than many settlements themselves. Their agents, sometimes traveling undercover or disguising their motives, became instrumental in preventing outbreaks of disease, mediating disputes, and spreading information about radiation safety, water purification, and agricultural techniques, demonstrating that even small interventions could dramatically improve survival odds. In the Mojave, their influence extended to New Vegas and surrounding territories, where they offered training, medical assistance, and intelligence to settlements like Goodsprings, moderating faction conflicts, and occasionally acting as neutral negotiators between the NCR, Caesar's Legion, and independent groups, emphasizing that knowledge could be as powerful as weaponry. They also maintained strict ethical standards, refusing to participate in slavery, forced experimentation, or coercion, which put them at odds with raider bands, corrupt merchants, and enclave remnants. Yet their commitment to impartiality and humanitarian goals won them grudging respect from multiple factions and communities across the Wasteland. The followers' libraries contained blueprints, survival manuals, and pre-war scientific research, allowing them to teach skills ranging from basic medicine to advanced engineering, fostering self-sufficiency among survivors, and inspiring future generations of scholars, scientists, and medics. They developed field operatives who could infiltrate hostile territories, deliver aid to those in need, and gather intelligence on dangerous regions, blending altruism with pragmatism to maximize the effectiveness of their mission. Despite limited manpower and resources, they managed to influence major historical events indirectly, providing critical information that enabled settlements to defend against raider attacks, survive radiation zones, or organize effective local governance, proving that knowledge could shape history even without armies or weapons. Ultimately, the followers of the apocalypse represent a counterpoint to the Wasteland's violence-driven narratives, embodying the enduring potential for human cooperation, ethical reasoning, and cultural preservation, showing that even in a world rebuilt from nuclear fire, education, medicine, and the sharing of information could redefine the boundaries of civilization and leave a lasting legacy across Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76, reminding all survivors that the survival of the human mind and spirit is as crucial as survival of the body in the irradiated ruins of the old world. In the fractured wasteland, where survival often demanded ruthlessness, smaller but culturally significant factions emerged that reflected the diversity, resilience, and eccentricity of post-war human society, with groups like the Boomers, the Kings, and the splintered chapters of the Brotherhood of Steel, illustrating how communities could form distinct identities around ideology, survival, and heritage, even without access to large territories or centralized power. The Boomers, isolated in Nellis Air Force Base, maintained pre-war military discipline and traditions, living in a fortified airfield where they preserved aircraft, explosives, and ammunition as both a means of defense and as a cultural touchstone, embracing a paradoxical mix of isolationism, hyper-patriotism, and celebration of violence as a rite of passage, with their ceremonies, weapons, stockpiles, and defense strategies representing a living museum of martial skill. In contrast, the Kings in Freeside, modeled after pre-war rock and roll culture, emphasized style, performance, and loyalty, using music, fashion, and informal leadership to unify a community otherwise vulnerable to raiders, economic pressures, and the influence of New Vegas's corporate powers, demonstrating that cultural cohesion could substitute for military might in a world where survival often favored those with charisma and social intelligence. The Brotherhood of Steel, long known for its militaristic zeal and technological preservation, experienced internal schisms, with some outcast chapters diverging from the main doctrine to adopt more pragmatic or locally focused strategies, trading, scavenging, or allying with other wastelanders rather than strictly hoarding advanced technology, showing that even rigid ideologies could adapt to environmental pressures and the realities of fragmented post-war geography. These outcast chapters were critical in regions like the capital Wasteland, where they sometimes partnered with the Brotherhood's allies or local settlements to repel raiders, protect technology, or recover lost pre-war knowledge, creating a network of influence that extended beyond formal hierarchical structures and underscored the adaptability of human institutions. The boomers' mastery of explosives and aviation not only safeguarded their community, but also made them legendary figures in Mojave lore, with outsiders often fearing their formidable artillery and air power, while simultaneously respecting their disciplined society and strict codes of honor. The king's emphasis on community and identity through entertainment fostered loyalty and social stability, allowing them to thrive in the shadow of New Vegas's corporate and criminal factions, mediating disputes and maintaining a sense of normalcy amidst chaos, illustrating that culture and ritual could be as vital to survival as weapons or walls. Across the wasteland, these smaller factions influenced local economies, politics, and social networks, providing services, protection, or trade to nearby settlements, while maintaining independence from larger powers like the NCR, Caesar's Legion, or the Enclave, showing that decentralization could succeed when combined with strong identity and resourcefulness. Their members often served as intermediaries, mercenaries, or educators in survival skills, passing on knowledge of combat, engineering, medicine, and leadership to neighboring communities, emphasizing that influence could be achieved without formal government or massive armies. The social experiments, rituals, and localized governance of these groups became models for how human society could reconstruct itself organically, offering lessons in resilience, cohesion, and adaptability that persisted long after their founders were gone. Ultimately, the boomers, the kings, and the Brotherhood outcasts highlight the pluralistic nature of post-apocalyptic human society, proving that survival depended not only on technology, weapons, or territory, but also on culture, identity, and communal purpose, and that even the smallest faction could leave a lasting imprint on the Wasteland's history, morality, and legend, shaping the narrative of Fallout's world across all games in ways that rivaled the most dominant powers, and demonstrating that human ingenuity could thrive even amid ruins, radiation, and the shadows of lost civilization. Long before the bombs fell, the United States had already sown the seeds of its own apocalypse through a vast network of secret projects and classified programs, reflecting humanity's ambition to master technology, control populations, and secure global dominance. And these efforts would leave a legacy that persisted long into the post-war wasteland. Among the most ambitious was the development of the forced evolutionary virus by the U.S. government in collaboration with the West Tech Research Facility, intended to produce a genetically superior soldier capable of surviving the most extreme environments, a project whose failures inadvertently created the first generation of supermutants, leaving behind ruins, tanks, and mutated creatures that would haunt the remnants of civilization for decades. In parallel, the government invested heavily in robotics and artificial intelligence, commissioning prototypes from Robco Industries and General Atomics, including early domestic units, automated sentries, and the massive military robot Liberty Prime, whose programming and eventual reactivation demonstrated both the sophistication and the unforeseen consequences of placing lethal autonomy in mechanical hands. Advanced energy research and satellite defense initiatives were also underway, such as the Archimedes 2 solar satellite project, which explored high-altitude power transmission and orbital weaponry, yet many of these projects were abandoned, leaving derelict infrastructure and experimental technology scattered across the country, waiting to be discovered by survivors. Nuclear testing and chemical weapons programs proliferated, often in remote deserts or hidden underground bunkers, producing mutagenic chemicals, radiation hotspots, and early prototypes for tactical nuclear devices, while civilian contractors and secret military bases conducted experiments whose outcomes were often left undocumented or classified, creating hidden legacies for those who would stumble across them centuries later. Energy weapons research advanced at a pace that exceeded conventional firearms, with developments in laser rifles, plasma weaponry, and miniaturized reactors demonstrating the potential for devastating future warfare, yet pre-war testing frequently ignored safety, environmental consequences, and long-term stability, creating volatile hazards that would persist long after society collapsed. The United States also maintained clandestine projects to manipulate human behavior and psychology, exemplified by the Volt-Tech social experiments that measured obedience, cooperation, and stress in controlled environments, blending surveillance, propaganda, and technological manipulation in ways that would later reverberate through the lives of Vault dwellers who emerged into the irradiated world. Offshore and inland, secret facilities explored genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and post-human augmentation, including early iterations of artificially enhanced soldiers, prototype cyborgs, and intelligence augmentation programs, leaving a trail of scientific breakthroughs alongside horrific failures, mutations, and ethical breaches that would define the moral complexity of the Wasteland. The Poseidon Energy Corporation experimented with alternative power generation and environmental control technologies, building massive dams, water purification systems, and experimental power grids that could have mitigated disaster had they not been cut off by nuclear devastation, leaving both opportunity and ruin for later explorers. High-security military projects like the development of Liberty Prime and orbital strike capabilities illustrated that the pre-war government prioritized deterrence and ideological supremacy, often at the cost of human life and ecological stability, reflecting a nation obsessed with control over both enemies and its own citizens. Collectively, these secret projects formed a shadow history of pre-war America, a testament to both ingenuity and hubris, whose technological remnants, ethical ambiguities, and environmental consequences would shape the struggles, innovations, and moral dilemmas of the Wasteland for generations, proving that the legacy of human ambition and scientific experimentation is inseparable from the very identity of the post-apocalyptic world, and that even centuries after the bombs, the echoes of pre-war secrets continue to dictate the fates of survivors, the rise of factions, and the stories that unfold across every corner of the Fallout universe. In the irradiated expanses of the Wasteland, where survival often demanded more than mere physical endurance, human belief and faith found new forms, and among the most enduring and peculiar was the Children of Atom, a religion born from both necessity and mutation that worshipped the destructive yet life-giving power of radiation as the very essence of creation and transformation, illustrating how catastrophe reshaped culture as profoundly as it reshaped landscapes. The Children of Atom, emerging in scattered enclaves across the capital Wasteland, Appalachia, and the Mojave, embraced radiation not only as divine, but also as a tool of purification, constructing shrines around glowing hotspots and venerating irradiated relics as holy artifacts, their leaders preaching that atomic energy, in its glowing form, was sacred, and that exposure was a rite of passage or a path to enlightenment. Beyond the children of Atom, other post-war faiths and cults took root, reflecting the diverse psychological and social responses to devastation. The Hubologists, who combined retro-futuristic philosophy with pseudo-scientific cosmology, sought extraterrestrial understanding, while localized spiritual movements arose in response to tribal survival, such as Appalachian sects, venerating the mountains as sentient guardians. Many of these faiths blended pre-war superstition with new interpretations of post-war phenomena, assigning morality and meaning to radiation, mutations, or the inexplicable behaviors of wasteland creatures, creating ethical systems that guided daily life, community interactions, and conflict resolution. Pilgrimages to irradiated zones, sacred fires, and abandoned vaults became common among devout groups, reinforcing communal identity while teaching lessons of endurance, obedience, or caution, and often serving as a stabilizing social framework in a world otherwise defined by chaos. Some cults, such as the Children of Atom, integrated strict hierarchical structures, rituals, and symbolic regalia to instill loyalty, whereas others remained loose associations, gathering intermittently for ceremonies or guidance from charismatic leaders, demonstrating the adaptability of religion to both environment and community size. Faith in the wasteland often intersected with survival practices. Devotees would risk glowing areas to harvest resources or protect sacred sites, blending practical necessity with spiritual devotion, while simultaneously creating tension with secular factions or other religious groups whose priorities often conflicted with theological dogma. Certain faiths also preserved fragments of pre-war knowledge, embedding cautionary tales about technology, governance, and human hubris into their rituals, effectively becoming repositories of moral and historical memory that could outlast formal institutions. Festivals, rituals, and sacred artifacts became cultural touchstones for entire regions, creating networks of influence, storytelling, and social cohesion that shaped trade, alliances, and conflict, proving that ideology could wield power as effectively as armies or weapons. Ultimately, the Children of Atom and other wasteland faiths exemplify the human drive to interpret catastrophe, find meaning in devastation, and impose order on chaos, reflecting how belief systems adapted to a world scorched by fire and radiation, and how these spiritual frameworks not only shaped community cohesion and moral philosophy, but also directly influenced factional conflicts, survival strategies, and the cultural legacy of the wasteland across Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76, demonstrating that, in a world rebuilt from nuclear ash, the power of faith remained as influential as any technological or martial innovation, guiding humanity toward resilience, ritual, and understanding amidst the ruins of civilization. Across the shattered landscapes of the post-nuclear United States, survival was rarely a solitary endeavor, and the wasteland's earliest travelers often relied upon companions who were more than mere allies. They were living embodiments of loyalty, skill, and the human capacity to adapt in a world of relentless danger, reflecting the ways in which personal bonds shaped both individual destiny and broader history. The first generation of wanderers, emerging from vaults, settlements, or refugee communities, frequently encountered animals, humans, and even artificial intelligences who would accompany them on journeys through irradiated cities, treacherous deserts, and mutated wilderness. And among the most iconic were canine companions such as Dogmeat, whose instinct, loyalty, and survival skills saved countless lives and established the enduring archetype of the Wasteland ally. Human companions, drawn from diverse backgrounds and moral philosophies, often served as moral foils, warriors, and mediators, shaping the choices of vault dwellers, couriers, and lone wanderers alike. With figures such as Veronica Santangelo, Arcade Gannon, and Nick Valentine exemplifying the intersection of ideology, skill, and personal history, each bringing unique expertise in combat, medicine, engineering, or diplomacy that could determine the survival of entire settlements or factions. The social dynamics of companionship extended beyond practical assistance. Bonds formed under fire provided emotional stability, ethical counsel, and critical decision-making frameworks for protagonists navigating a morally ambiguous world. While the experiences of traveling with companions illustrated the broader impact of interdependence, trust, and leadership in post-war reconstruction, wanderers themselves often served as conduits for culture, ideology, and knowledge, carrying information between vaults, settlements, and regional powers, and companions frequently acted as translators of these cultural and historical legacies, ensuring that lessons from pre-war civilization, vault experiments, or the moral consequences of factional conflict were passed along with survival strategies and tactical expertise. Each companion's personal history, motivations, and ethical compass also shaped regional events. For example, Arcade's advocacy for medical ethics influenced the outcomes of faction disputes in the capital Wasteland, while Veronica's loyalty to the Brotherhood of Steel informed choices regarding the preservation or deployment of advanced technology, demonstrating that individual agency intertwined with collective consequence. Artificial companions, including robots like Codsworth, EDE, and Rex, added further complexity, blending pre-war technological ingenuity with adaptive programming to create entities capable of learning, aiding, and even challenging human ethical assumptions, and their presence often blurred the line between sentience, loyalty, and strategic advantage, serving as microcosms of human-machine interaction in the post-apocalyptic era. Animal and humanoid companions alike provided an additional narrative lens through which players could explore themes of morality, survival, and personal growth, creating emergent stories that were both deeply personal and canonically integrated, illustrating that the survival of the Wasteland was dependent not merely on weapons, technology, or shelter, but on the bonds forged in adversity. In essence, the companions and wanderers of the Wasteland represent the human, animal, and artificial elements that collectively preserved civilization, transmitted knowledge, and embodied the ethical dilemmas of the New World, reinforcing the idea that survival was as much a social enterprise as a physical struggle, and that the enduring relationships formed across the desolate terrain became a living testament to resilience, loyalty, and the capacity for cooperation amidst ruin, influencing settlement formation, factional alliances, and the very culture of the Wasteland across Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76, proving that companionship was not a luxury, but a defining pillar of post-apocalyptic life. Amid the Wasteland's ruins lie the remnants of humanity's most ambitious and secretive scientific endeavors. Places like the Sierra Madre, Big Mountain, Big MT, and numerous hidden research zones that illustrate both the ingenuity and hubris of a civilization obsessed with progress, even as it hurtled toward self-destruction, where pre-war technology and post-war adaptation collided to produce sites of mystery, danger, and innovation that continue to shape the post-apocalyptic world. The Sierra Madre, concealed beneath the irradiated Mojave, represents one of the most enigmatic legacies. A casino constructed with cutting-edge holographic and security technologies intended to trap and manipulate its visitors, filled with automated defenses, ghostly apparitions, and traps that ensured no human could fully master or escape it without understanding both pre-war engineering and the twisted psychological design of its creators, serving as a chilling reminder that entertainment, greed, and technology could be weaponized in equal measure. Big MT, in the Nevada Wasteland, became a sprawling hub of scientific experimentation, where the think tank and various pre-war laboratories pursued research in robotics, cybernetics, genetic engineering, and behavioral conditioning, producing advanced synth prototypes, intelligent machines, and even early attempts at enhancing human cognition, demonstrating the capacity for both brilliance and ethical disregard when science operates unchecked. It was here that autonomous robots, weaponized drones, and experimental implants were tested in extreme conditions, leaving behind fields of derelict machines and deranged intellects that would challenge any wandering survivor while preserving knowledge that would be sought by later factions. Other hidden research zones across the wasteland, often buried beneath mountains, deserts, or abandoned military complexes, contained projects ranging from FEV studies to energy weapon prototypes and satellite-linked communication systems, many of which were abandoned or lost during the chaos of the Great War, leaving dangerous legacies for explorers, scavengers, and emerging settlements. The remnants of these zones, from malfunctioning Securitrons to rogue AI, highlight both the continuity of technological ambition and the unpredictable consequences of pre-war experimentation. In Appalachia, secret facilities connected to Project Safehouse and other Vault-Tec adjunct projects continued similar lines of inquiry, focusing on bioengineering, radiation adaptation, and social conditioning, creating isolated nodes of pre-war knowledge that survived hidden from raiders, mutants, and even organized human factions, providing future explorers with insight into both the successes and catastrophic failures of the old world. These hidden zones were rarely designed with the average human in mind. Their automated defenses, environmental hazards, and experimental creatures created near-impenetrable barriers that required intelligence, adaptability, and often moral compromise to navigate, demonstrating that the pursuit of knowledge in the pre-war era was as dangerous as it was ambitious. From advanced robotics in Big MT to the psychological mazes of the Sierra Madre, the interplay between technology and human desire becomes apparent, as researchers tested not only machines, but human nature itself, often exploiting greed, ambition, and curiosity in ways that would echo long after the war. Survivors who encountered these zones often became legends themselves, their stories of overcoming traps, rogue constructs, and deranged experiments spreading among settlements, influencing local law, scavenger routes, and even factional strategies, showing that hidden science could shape culture as much as any faction or settlement. Collectively, the Sierra Madre, Big MT, and other concealed laboratories illustrate the dual legacy of human civilization, the brilliance of invention paired with the peril of overreach, a pattern repeated across the wasteland, where technological marvels often carried the seeds of devastation. The knowledge preserved, the dangers encountered, and the moral quandaries presented by these sites continue to inform how survivors understand pre-war society, technological responsibility, and the thin line between progress and catastrophe, proving that even in the irradiated ruins, the ambitions of the old world endure, challenging humanity to learn, adapt, and reconcile its past, while forging a future amid the endless wasteland. In the irradiated world left behind by the Great War, humanity was forced to share the wasteland with those transformed by radiation, creating entire societies of mutants and ghouls whose struggles, leadership, and attempts at coexistence reveal a complex portrait of adaptation, resilience, and the quest for identity in a world that had fundamentally changed. The supermutants, first created by the forced evolutionary virus in the West Tech Research Facility, and later propagated in Mariposa and Vault 87, formed organized enclaves such as the remnants of the Master's Army, where they sought to impose a new vision of evolution upon humanity, blending military discipline with the aggressive expansion of their own kind, demonstrating that mutation could not only survive, but also organize and pursue ideological objectives. Other supermutant groups, like those in the Sierra Madre or roaming the Mojave, evolved distinct social structures, some abandoning the goal of conquest to focus on survival, hunting, and scavenging, while others clung to militaristic hierarchies, showing that mutation alone did not dictate morality or purpose, but rather the choices of those altered by circumstance. Ghouls, divided into feral and non-feral populations, created their own communities, from Necropolis in the capital Wasteland to the settlements around the glowing sea, developing social networks, leadership councils, and barter systems to navigate the dangers of human prejudice, raiders, and environmental hazards, exemplifying the tension between survival and societal integration. Non-feral ghouls often became chroniclers, educators, and medical practitioners within settlements, bridging the gap between human survivors and those permanently altered by radiation, and their long lifespans allowed them to maintain historical knowledge that humans alone could not preserve, turning them into repositories of both cultural memory and technical expertise. Feral ghouls, by contrast, became both a cautionary tale and an ecological force, inhabiting ruins, irradiated zones, and strategic choke points, influencing migration patterns of survivors, raider movements, and even military campaigns, while their existence underscored the persistent threat of radiation-induced transformation to all who entered hazardous zones. Hybrid societies emerged in places where ghouls, mutants, and humans coexisted, often informally, as in the efforts around Broken Hills and Vault 87's outskirts, where alliances and trade networks arose out of necessity, demonstrating that survival could override species divisions and that cooperation between radically different post-human populations was possible despite prejudice, fear, and history. Leadership within these communities varied greatly. The Master's descendants sought ideological conquest, ghoulish elders emphasized preservation of culture and knowledge, and smaller mutant clans often focused on localized defense or resource accumulation, illustrating the diversity of political organization that arose from post-war mutations. In Appalachia, ghouls and mutated creatures interacted with human settlements, such as those established by the responders, creating both tension and collaboration, as humans attempted to reclaim habitable land while respecting the territories and rights of mutated populations, an ongoing negotiation that shaped regional politics and survival strategies. The existence of these societies forced human factions, raiders, and explorers to reconsider the definition of humanity itself, challenging moral and ethical norms as they encountered sentient, intelligent beings whose needs and rights could not be ignored, and whose loyalty, intelligence, or aggression could alter the balance of power in any region. Across the Wasteland, mutant and ghoul communities became living experiments in adaptation, reflecting the consequences of radiation, the resilience of life, and the capacity for culture to emerge in even the most extreme conditions, influencing settlement formation, factional diplomacy, and the moral framework through which survivors understood the world, proving that in Fallout's post-apocalyptic reality, evolution is not just biological, but social, political, and philosophical, and that the legacy of mutation endures as both a challenge and a testament to the enduring will of life amidst destruction. In the post-apocalyptic expanses of the Wasteland, the collapse of centralized authority and the scarcity of resources gave rise to a brutal subculture of raiders, slavers, and regional warlords whose existence both threatened and defined the survival strategies of other communities, while shaping the moral and political landscape of the irradiated world. Raider groups, ranging from the technologically adept fiends of the Mojave to the tribal-inspired jackals, vipers, and the gangs of the capital Wasteland, evolved rapidly in response to environmental pressures, scavenging pre-war weaponry, vehicles, and armor while adopting distinctive symbols, rituals, and hierarchical systems to enforce loyalty, control territory, and maximize efficiency in predation, demonstrating that even in lawless chaos, social organization emerged to sustain violent economies. Slaving operations, such as those centralized at Paradise Falls in the capital Wasteland, created structured systems of oppression, turning kidnapped survivors into labor, bargaining assets, or tools of economic power, illustrating that the Wasteland's brutality was often intertwined with organized infrastructure, negotiation, and long-term planning, rather than mere impulsive violence. Individual warlords and charismatic leaders exerted influence over vast regions, consolidating resources, weapons, and followers to project power over rival factions and settlements, with figures like Caesar of Caesar's Legion embodying the fusion of ideology, military discipline, and ruthless enforcement that allowed a single vision to shape large-scale human behavior, imposing order through fear, cultural assimilation, and strict hierarchical control. Raider enclaves often exploited pre-war technology, repurposed settlements, and derelict military installations to create fortified bases capable of defending against both humans and mutated threats, showing a pragmatic adaptation to a dangerous environment, while simultaneously cultivating reputations of terror that reinforced psychological control over nearby populations. Conflict between raider factions and established settlements served as a crucible for the evolution of both military strategy and diplomacy, forcing emerging communities like Shady Sands, Megaton, and Goodsprings to develop defensive systems, alliances, and trade networks that would eventually form the backbone of proto-states such as the New California Republic, while demonstrating that law, morality, and survival could be simultaneously contested and enforced through violence. Raiders and slavers did not exist in isolation. Their influence often intersected with ghoul and mutant populations, abandoned military complexes, and hidden scientific zones, creating zones of negotiation, conflict, and uneasy coexistence where survival strategies depended on intelligence, mobility, and adaptability. The social and psychological impact of raiders extended beyond immediate violence, influencing local cultures, rituals, and even fashion, as communities adopted symbols of strength or intimidation to protect themselves or to absorb the aesthetic dominance of nearby gangs, illustrating that culture itself could emerge from fear and coercion. These groups also played a role in maintaining the post-war economic ecosystem, facilitating trade through extortion, controlled scavenging, or barter of rare items, weapons, and technology, creating a shadow economy that rivaled the organized settlements while remaining untethered to formal governance. Across the Wasteland, the proliferation of raiders, slavers, and warlords created a constant tension between chaos and order, violence and governance, serving as both catalysts and obstacles to human civilization, shaping the strategies, ethics, and ambitions of factions, settlers, and wanderers alike, and underscoring a fundamental truth of the post-nuclear world, that power, survival, and morality are inseparably intertwined, and that the shadow of predation informs every corner of Fallout's narrative landscape, influencing history, culture, and the ongoing struggle of humanity to rebuild from ashes while confronting the consequences of its own destructive impulses. In the Commonwealth, long after the bombs fell and civilization fractured into scattered settlements, the emergence of the railroad represented a unique response to the moral and philosophical challenges posed by the existence of synths, artificially created humans whose sentience, emotions, and capacity for suffering blurred the line between machine and person, illustrating that in a world rebuilt from nuclear ash, ethical dilemmas could persist as sharply as physical survival, and that questions of identity, autonomy, and justice were as critical as the reconstruction of buildings or the reclamation of resources. The railroad, a secretive network dedicated to freeing escaped synths from the Institute and protecting their rights, operated in the shadows, using encrypted communications, safe houses, and covert operatives to navigate a society largely indifferent or hostile to synthetic life, highlighting the ingenuity and determination of those committed to moral principles, even when such principles could endanger their own survival. Its origins are rooted in the disillusionment of citizens who recognized the Institute's godlike control over the Commonwealth, including advanced genetic engineering, holographic masking, and near-omnipotent surveillance, yet who believed that life, regardless of its origin, deserved freedom and dignity, demonstrating the persistence of humanistic philosophy in a society otherwise dominated by pragmatism, fear, and opportunism. The railroad's operatives, including figures like Deacon and Macready, exemplified the blend of espionage, negotiation, and clandestine action necessary to protect their charges, functioning as guides, diplomats, and moral agents who constantly weighed the costs of intervention against the principles they upheld, reflecting the complex interplay between survival, loyalty, and ethical responsibility in the post-apocalyptic world. Their actions often intersected with larger factions, forcing delicate interactions with the Minutemen, the Brotherhood of Steel, and even parts of the Institute itself, demonstrating that moral choices in the Wasteland could not exist in isolation, but were inextricably tied to political, technological, and social dynamics, and that the defense of sentient beings required both courage and strategy. Beyond their immediate mission, the railroad also influenced local culture, fostering communities of empathy and cooperation, spreading knowledge of synth rights, and preserving moral philosophy as a living tradition, even amidst pervasive danger, showing that ideology can survive alongside the chaos of survival and the threat of annihilation. Their work raised profound questions about what it means to be human, the obligations of creators to their creations, and the ethical responsibilities of society to those who are different, forcing survivors to confront uncomfortable truths about the boundaries of consciousness, the definition of freedom, and the moral costs of technological advancement, particularly in a world where such advancements could easily be weaponized, hidden, or misused. Across the wasteland, the railroad's legacy challenges all who encounter it to consider the consequences of their actions, the rights of others, human or synthetic, and the possibility that civilization is measured not just by physical survival, but by the recognition and protection of sentient life, proving that even amidst the ruins of nuclear devastation, philosophy, empathy, and moral courage can persist, and that the questions raised by the railroad about humanity, personhood, and justice will echo across settlements, factions, and individual choices, leaving an indelible mark on the cultural, ethical, and social fabric of the Commonwealth and the greater Fallout universe. Throughout the post-nuclear world, remnants of pre-war technology continue to shape the fate of survivors, factions, and settlements, as lost inventions, experimental energy systems, and advanced robotics illustrate both the brilliance and the hubris of human innovation, providing invaluable resources while simultaneously presenting unprecedented dangers, and these relics of the old world remain key to understanding the scope of civilization that once was. Robotics played a central role in this legacy, with models like Mr. Handy and Protectrons serving both domestic and military functions, their programming often surviving centuries beyond their intended lifespans, and occasionally evolving into semi-autonomous entities whose presence could stabilize settlements, enforce law, or, in the case of rogue units, create localized threats that challenged even experienced wastelanders. Advanced combat systems, including Securitrons, originally deployed by the Mojave's New Vegas, combined artificial intelligence with heavy armament, demonstrating how technology could enforce ideology and corporate control, while also offering opportunities for reprogramming, adaptation, and alliance building by perceptive factions, showing that pre-war ingenuity could be redirected to serve human survival. Energy technologies, from plasma and laser weaponry to miniaturized nuclear reactors and pre-war fusion cores, provided both practical advantages and moral dilemmas, as scavengers and factions weighed the benefits of harnessing powerful energy sources against the risks of radiation, system failure, or catastrophic misuse, emphasizing that the wasteland was shaped as much by human understanding of these tools as by their mere presence. Pre-war satellites and orbital initiatives, including the partially operational Archimedes 2 solar platform, revealed a level of technological ambition that extended far beyond Earth's surface, and while most of these programs were abandoned, their remains, debris, partially functional systems, and access codes could still influence regional power dynamics, energy availability, and factional conflict, offering strategic advantages to those who could master them. Research centers and laboratories scattered across the Mojave, the capital Wasteland, Appalachia, and beyond continue to house experimental devices, often left powered and functioning through automated systems, from environmental controls to prototype synths and robotic operators, underscoring the persistence of pre-war infrastructure and the way it shaped post-war society. Big MT, Poseidon energy facilities, and isolated military bunkers exemplify this technological legacy, with discoveries including advanced cybernetics, energy weapons, and environmental control systems providing both life-saving benefits and new threats, depending on who claimed them and for what purpose, illustrating that technology was rarely neutral in the Wasteland, but always intertwined with human decision-making and ambition. Artificial intelligence beyond robotics, including the partially sentient programs controlling defense systems or infrastructure, occasionally achieved rogue autonomy, creating scenarios where survivors faced ethical questions alongside tactical challenges, highlighting the complex relationship between humanity and the machines it had created. Even long-buried vault technology, experimental drones, and prototypes of automated defense or medical systems continued to emerge across the Wasteland, reminding all who encountered them that the pre-war world was defined by experimentation, ambition, and the pursuit of mastery over both environment and society, a pursuit that survived the nuclear apocalypse in physical remnants and functional logic alike. Ultimately, the Wasteland's lost technologies represent both opportunity and caution, shaping the strategies, conflicts, and survival of every human, ghoul, and mutant who navigates the irradiated terrain, proving that even in the absence of formal civilization, the echoes of human innovation, ambition, and error continue to define the possibilities and limitations of life in the Fallout universe, creating a landscape where knowledge, skill, and moral judgment determine who thrives, who survives, and who becomes a footnote in the ruins of a world that once sought to conquer both nature and itself. In the desolate aftermath of nuclear devastation, the slow emergence of settlements across the Wasteland became the most visible testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the determination to rebuild civilization from ashes. With communities like Rivet City, Good Springs, Diamond City, and Foundation demonstrating diverse approaches to governance, social cohesion, and adaptation, while highlighting the interplay between survival, morality, and resource management. Rivet City, constructed aboard a massive aircraft carrier in the irradiated waters of the capital Wasteland, became a hub of commerce, medicine, and diplomacy, integrating pre-war technology with post-war innovation, offering refuge to traders, scavengers, and displaced families, and serving as a center where knowledge, resources, and political influence converged, illustrating that even in isolation, structured settlements could project power, culture, and stability across a dangerous landscape. Smaller communities, such as Good Springs in the Mojave, exemplified the importance of local leadership, cooperative labor, and social rituals in maintaining cohesion, where townsfolk shared responsibilities for defense, agriculture, and trade, while navigating threats from raiders, mutated wildlife, and environmental hazards, showing that communal effort could yield security, prosperity, and identity even in a harsh and fractured world. Diamond City, carved within the remains of Fenway Park in Boston, combined adaptive architecture with commerce and governance, turning a pre-war landmark into a symbol of cultural continuity and urban survival. Its markets, guard systems, and social hierarchies, reflecting the capacity of humans to reclaim and repurpose history, while also negotiating tensions between settlers, raiders, and larger regional powers, demonstrating that reconstruction required both ingenuity and diplomacy. Foundation in Appalachia, shaped by Reconstructionist principles, and the guidance of survivors experienced in governance, engineering, and resource management, offered an example of deliberately planned urban restoration, incorporating sustainable energy, housing, water purification, and defense networks, and acting as a model for how human knowledge could be applied to create durable societies, blending lessons from pre-war technology with practical post-war adaptation. Across these settlements, the establishment of trade routes, communal defense systems, and educational initiatives reinforced cohesion, while the integration of pre-war artifacts, holotapes, and surviving technology provided both practical tools and cultural continuity, ensuring that the mistakes and knowledge of the old world informed new growth. Leadership in settlements often emerged organically, based on merit, bravery, or knowledge, rather than inheritance or wealth, reflecting a return to practical governance rooted in survival and mutual benefit, and demonstrating that human society could reorganize along cooperative, meritocratic, or ideologically inspired lines. Despite the absence of formal pre-war institutions, social structures within these communities frequently included councils, militia, and cooperative work groups, with citizens contributing skills in medicine, engineering, agriculture, and security, creating interdependent networks capable of responding to both internal disputes and external threats, while also providing a foundation for the spread of information, ethical norms, and cultural traditions across regions. Reconstruction efforts also highlighted the role of moral philosophy and humanism in survival, as leaders and residents negotiated issues of justice, trade ethics, and the treatment of outsiders, mutants, and synths, shaping local culture and governance in ways that reflected both necessity and choice, ensuring that societal growth was guided by principles as much as by physical survival. The ongoing success of these settlements inspired migration, alliance building, and the formation of proto-states, illustrating that the seeds of large-scale governance, commerce, and cultural preservation were sown through small, deliberate acts of reconstruction, negotiation, and community effort, and that even in the irradiated wasteland, hope persisted as a tangible, actionable force capable of transforming ruins into thriving centers of life, learning, and leadership. Collectively, these settlements stand as enduring symbols of human perseverance, showing that civilization, though fractured, could emerge again through ingenuity, cooperation, and the unyielding determination to reclaim the world, proving that the legacy of human survival lies not only in weapons and technology, but in the communities, culture, and shared values that continue to rebuild and shape the fallout universe long after the bombs fell. Even in a world shaped by the devastation of nuclear war and the painstaking reconstruction of society, the wasteland remains filled with enigmas, legends, and phenomena that defy easy explanation, representing both the curiosity and the fear of humanity as it grapples with the remnants of a technologically advanced, yet morally compromised civilization. One such mystery is the Dunwich Building in the capital Wasteland, a location steeped in pre-war occult lore and seemingly supernatural events that suggest the persistence of unexplained forces or psychological manipulation, challenging survivors to question the boundaries between science, superstition, and environmental radiation-induced anomalies. Similarly, reports of extraterrestrial encounters, such as the crashed UFOs scattered throughout the Mojave and Appalachia, as well as encounters with the enigmatic Zetan aliens in Fallout 3, raise questions about the pre-war government's knowledge of and interaction with extraterrestrial life, highlighting a long-standing theme of hidden experimentation, technological secrecy, and the unforeseen consequences of global ambition. Cryptids, whether rumored mutated creatures, ghoul legends, or unverified sightings of creatures like the Mothman in West Virginia, serve as both cultural touchstones and ecological puzzles, prompting speculation about mutation, adaptation, and the long-term effects of radiation on previously known species, reflecting humanity's enduring fascination with the unknown in a world that has already witnessed the impossible. Vault mysteries, including seldom mentioned or incomplete vaults with strange experiments, such as Vault 108's cloning program, or Vault 92's psychological conditioning, illustrate the vast extent of Vault-Tech's morally ambiguous experimentation, leaving behind unanswered questions about the ethics, goals, and long-term consequences of their designs, and demonstrating that even the remnants of structured pre-war society contained secrets capable of influencing events decades later. Unexplained pre-war technology, like the occasional activation of rogue robots, AI systems, or malfunctioning defense platforms, also represents unresolved enigmas, suggesting that the ingenuity and ambition of the old world can still generate unforeseen effects long after human oversight has ended, forcing survivors to treat even seemingly inert machinery with caution and respect. Rumors of hidden vaults, lost cities, or inaccessible laboratories proliferate among scavengers and explorers, often blending local folklore with fragments of historical record, producing a body of knowledge that is part cautionary tale, part roadmap for discovery, and part ethical puzzle, reflecting the way human imagination reconstructs incomplete evidence into narratives that guide survival and decision-making. Environmental anomalies, such as irradiated storms, spontaneous mutations, and unpredictable fallout zones, persist as living reminders that the world itself holds mysteries beyond human control, shaping migration patterns, settlement locations, and factional strategies, while reinforcing the necessity of adaptation and observation. Legends of pre-war secret societies, hidden agendas, and shadow programs like Project Safehouse, Poseidon energy experiments, or advanced military research add layers of intrigue, revealing that many threats and opportunities encountered by Wastelanders are the direct result of decisions made long before the bombs fell, yet whose purpose, scale, and ethical implications remain only partially understood. The persistence of these unsolved mysteries ensures that exploration, curiosity, and caution remain central to life in the wasteland, challenging every survivor to balance risk, discovery, and morality, while providing narrative depth that interweaves science, legend, and human behavior. Ultimately, the unsolved mysteries of Fallout serve as a testament to the incompleteness of knowledge, the endurance of legend, and the ongoing tension between human ambition and the unknowable forces of the post-apocalyptic world, ensuring that the wasteland remains not only a site of survival, but also a canvas for wonder, fear, and philosophical reflection, echoing across Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76, and confirming that even after centuries, the world retains secrets capable of shaping the choices, culture, and moral compass of every inhabitant. Beyond the irradiated ruins, shattered vaults, and mutated landscapes, Fallout's enduring legacy lies not only in its depiction of post-apocalyptic survival, but in the thematic, moral, and cultural lessons that continue to resonate across its games, media, and the imaginations of fans, demonstrating how the consequences of human ambition, technological overreach, and ethical compromise shape civilization long after catastrophe. The franchise's persistent exploration of moral ambiguity challenges players to weigh survival against conscience, choices against consequences, and ideology against pragmatism, illustrating that in a world rebuilt from nuclear fire, no decision exists in a vacuum, and that each action, whether in alliances, combat, resource management, or diplomacy, carries ramifications that echo through communities, factions, and individual lives. The recurring motifs of Vault-Tech's experiments, the ethical dilemmas posed by synths, ghouls, and supermutants, and the remnants of pre-war technology serve as both narrative and philosophical touchstones, framing a universe in which curiosity, ambition, and hubris intersect with survival, resilience, and morality, creating a complex social and ethical landscape that is uniquely interactive and immersive. Fallout storytelling consistently emphasizes the cyclical nature of civilization, showing how human societies rise, fall, and attempt reconstruction, and how lessons of history can be forgotten, misapplied, or deliberately ignored, resulting in repeating patterns of conflict, adaptation, and cultural evolution, whether in the Mojave, capital Wasteland, Appalachia, or other regions. The franchise's world-building, from the minutiae of pre-war daily life to the grand designs of secret government projects, provides a coherent internal history that rewards both casual players and dedicated lore enthusiasts, offering insight into economics, politics, science, and sociology while maintaining narrative, freedom, and moral complexity, demonstrating that the human story persists even in extremity. Beyond the games themselves, Fallout's influence extends into popular culture, inspiring fan art, novels, role-playing communities, and discussions on ethics, governance, and technology, illustrating that the universe created by these narratives resonates because it reflects both real-world dilemmas and speculative consequences in a highly interactive and emotionally compelling format. The series' distinctive aesthetic, the retro-futuristic art style, the fusion of 1950 seconds Americana with post-apocalyptic decay, and the integration of music, propaganda, and media artifacts reinforces its themes, conveying a sense of irony, nostalgia, and cautionary storytelling that transcends gameplay mechanics to become a commentary on human culture, ambition, and resilience. Importantly, Fallout's legacy demonstrates that hope, community, and moral reasoning can persist even amidst devastation, as survivors reconstruct settlements, form alliances, and make choices that preserve life, knowledge, and cultural memory, showing that human ingenuity and ethical reflection endure even in a landscape dominated by chaos, mutation, and scarcity. The franchise's ongoing exploration of factional conflict, ideological struggle, and technological consequences underscores its philosophical depth, inviting players to examine questions of freedom, responsibility, and identity in a controlled yet unpredictable environment, creating lessons that extend beyond the virtual world into reflections on contemporary society and human nature. Ultimately, Fallout's enduring legacy is a testament to storytelling, ethical exploration, and interactive world-building, proving that a universe forged from nuclear catastrophe can remain vibrant, meaningful, and influential for decades, and that the moral, cultural, and technological consequences of human action, whether through ambition, folly, or heroism, will continue to shape both the wasteland within the games and the imagination of those who explore it, ensuring that the themes, lessons, and legends of Fallout persist as a mirror of humanity's potential, failures, and resilience in every corner of a world rebuilt from ashes.